Hey, what's up, everybody? It is Blue at bluebearsgames, and this week it is another Commander's Blues Budget Brews. This is the second deck that I am presenting from the customer Nathaniel, who ordered last week's deck, which was the Bear Force 1 deck. It was for his 9-year-old. This one is for him. He specifically wanted this deck for himself to play his other friends, and it's a good one. So I mentioned last week it will be Toxrill. And the only problem with that is, as you can tell, I don't have Toxrill out. Normally I have my Commander out to tell you guys all about. Unfortunately, I don't own a copy, so I'm going to show you how this came about, actually. And the reason why I don't have a copy is because I didn't open one. I was able to make the deck anyway because what had happened was he went over a couple of options that he had already had of his own, and I'll have the graphic up here for you to see of the ones he gave me to choose from. And the problem was that the one in the upper left, I wanted to choose as the build because I want to do that for myself. But as I was talking to him, he said he was really interested in doing like the 2 partner commanders, or the most interested he was in was Toxrill, but his budget was $40. Now, I can do that. I have done that. It is possible. I've reached the upper limit of that $40 budget with what I could, and what I'm about to show you is what I came up with. Obviously, Toxrill is blue and black, and I'm going to have Toxrill up here for you to see, but I'll tell you what Toxrill does. So, 7 to cast, so 2 black and 5 for a 7/7. It is a slug horror. And at the beginning of each end step, you put a slime counter on each creature you don't control, and creatures you don't control get -1/-1 for each slime counter on them. And then when a creature with a slime counter on it dies, you create a slug. It's a 1/1 black creature. And then the reason why I can do black-blue is because his color identity on his ability is blue-black. His ability is to sacrifice a slug for a blue and a black, and you can draw a card. So the way that this rolls out is that Toxrill himself literally is a board wipe all on its own. So he helps make creature decks versus you honest, and that's the reason why he was chosen. He faces a lot of elf decks and goblin decks, so he wanted to take Toxrill and make it so he could stop all that craziness. So what I came up with was, obviously Toxrill's going to be the board wipe guy. In these colors, that's great. So I came up with infect, because if you're going to put counters on things, you might as well put a lot of them on there. So it's infect with proliferate. So I'll go over the deck, and we'll show you what I got. So I always do lands first. It's black and blue, so I'll show you what I got here. We did Choked Estuary, Temple of Deceit, and Exotic Orchard. Now, I went with Exotic Orchard for a reason. Comes into play untapped, and 2 of the more popular colors in Commander are blue and black, so you're going to hit usually. And if not, okay, so you miss every once in a while. Thriving More, I had mentioned before that I kind of am happy that I got enough of the Thriving ones that I can actually start putting them in decks. So this one had the blue and the black one. And then, of course, the blue-black comes into play tapped one. Some of them gain life, some of them don't. I got a couple of them. The Aqueduct was a nice little addition just because, you know, it comes into play tapped, and then you return a land, and if you bounce a land that helps you gain life, then, you know, you've got something going there. And Evolving Wilds, like I always do, for mana fixing or for deck thing, or both. And then the rest is just Swamps and Islands, and again, as I've always told you, in the description of the video is the exact number, because there is a link to MTG Goldfish for the deck, exact copy of what I have here. Ramp, black-blue doesn't have it, it's not green, it's not white, so let's go with what we got. Ever-flowing Chalice, because of the proliferate sub-theme, can make this guy come into play with 1 counter, and then you can make it grow and grow and grow, so you can actually make this thing start tapping for a lot of mana. Exploroscope is one of my budget little niche cards that I like to put into my decks because it's cheap to cast, it's fun to cast, cheap to equip for 1, and especially in like a token deck when you don't care if the tokens die. When a creature attacks that's equipped with this, you go and look at the top card of your library, and if it's a land card, put it in the battlefield tapped. It's quasi-ramp, it's kind of like deck thinning, so I like using it. Mind Stone, because you can sack it to draw a card later if you don't need the extra mana. Same thing with the Dimir Locket, and Dimir Keyrune becomes a horror. I liked following the theme of the fact that it was a horror, so that's why I did that one. And then the Cluestone, you can sack for drawing a card. And Burnished Heart is actually not bad. Now, 3 and 3 is not great, but it's good to be able to sacrifice something in response to something else and then go get 2 basic lands, so it thins your deck out and blah, blah, blah. So, and they come into play. So that's the ramp section. Pretty simple, pretty basic, but quite effective. The creatures are where we get a little wonky. So there's a lot of different things in this that we're going to go over. We're going to have some infect. We're going to have some guys who benefit from death triggers. We're going to have some guys who sack things to make death triggers. There's a lot of stuff going on here. So I'll start with the infect. I did a lot of artifact infect stuff so that it didn't matter what colors came out on the board. Start with Necropede because he has the bonus of putting a -1/-1 counter on something. And then when you proliferate later, it starts to add up. Phyrexian Digester, just a regular old infect. Another infect creature here. This one lets you return an infect a card with infect back to your hand if it dies. Core Prowler was not bad. This one is an infect, and then it proliferates when it dies. So again, this one did both themes that I was going for. Phyrexian Juggernaut, it's just a big infect guy. Man, if this guy hits and then you can buff him, you can almost end the game with just him. Contagious Nim, so it's a 2/2 infect. Whispering Spectre, it's a 3 to cast 1/1 flying infect, but here's the deal. Whenever Whispering Spectre deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice it, and then if you do, That player discards a card for each poison counter he or she has. Not really effective in this setting, but it's an option in case you want to do that. Flesh Eater Imp, another flying infect. I wanted to try to find as many evasive creatures as I could with the infect. You can sacrifice a creature, and remember there's going to be slugs out in play, and Flesh Eater Imp can get +1/+1 into end of turn. If you have a lot of board wipe going on with the slime counters, this guy, you can create a whole bunch of slugs out of that, and then this guy can actually do a one-shot swing for 10 infects, so that's why that's in there. Scourge Servant, another infect guy. Toxic Nim, a regenerating infect guy, always good to have that, so it's repeatable, putting -1/-1 counters on things. Bladed Ancient, obviously because he's unblockable. Now, if you could find a way to buff him, this deck doesn't really do that, but if you could, he's pretty much a one-shot or two. Viral Drake was one of those doubles. Again, it's infect and it proliferates. Actually, a pretty good find. It was the only one I had in all of my stuff. It took me a while to find him. I knew I had him. I was able to find him for you. With that proliferate, we're going to parlay into Thrumming Bird, which whenever he deals combat damage, you proliferate, and he's got flying for evasion. Flux Channeler, so whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you proliferate. See where the theme's going here. Some guys that benefit from death triggers or when things are in the graveyard because they died. Whenever a player sacrifices a creature, you may put a +1/+1 counter on Mortician Beetle. So there are a lot of things out there that you can sacrifice, or that people use to sacrifice, you know, altars and stuff like that. He benefits from all those death triggers happening when they're sacrificed. One of the Precinct 6, another one that benefits from things that are dead in the graveyard. He gets bigger. Malakir Coldblade, same thing. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, doesn't matter how, it doesn't have to be sacrificed on this one. He gets a +1/+1 counter, so he again gets bigger. See the theme here? I put a little bit of Aristocrat theme in here as well. It's just a small couple of them. Zolaport Cutthroat, so whenever a creature, whenever he or another creature, doesn't matter on whose side dies, each opponent loses a life and gains a life. So it's counterproductive to do both regular damage and infect damage, but it's beneficial in here because you want to have multiple avenues of winning, so people will focus on one or the other. If not, you have to have multiple people targeting different things, so you want to go in different directions, so not everybody can just target you from one thing, okay? Ward Eye Witch, so whenever another creature dies, or whenever it dies or another creature dies, you scry one. Obviously, scrying is actually pretty powerful in Magic. It lets you get better draws. Morbid Opportunist, this one was a good one too. So whenever one or more other creatures die, draw a card, but it only happens once a turn. The good thing is that Toxrill's ability happens every turn. So something might die every turn, so your hand's going to get really big really fast. Vindictive Vampire, another Aristocrats guy, and this one deals 1 damage to each opponent, and you gain a life whenever another creature that you control dies. Now, remember, you're sacrificing things like the slugs. That's where the Mortician Beetle came in. You have your own sack triggers, and I can't find it. You have your own sack triggers for the slugs, so that'll start helping Vindictive Vampire start draining your opponent. Same thing with Falcon Wreath Noble. The difference between these two, though, is that one does it to each opponent, this one does it to target player. So that's the only big difference. Oh, also, the other difference, another creature, not another creature you control. Sorry, I forgot to add that. Ogre Slumlord, 5 to cast for a 3/3. He has some pretty cool stuff here. So whenever another non-token creature you control, I'm sorry, you don't have to control it. Whenever another non-token creature dies, so with all those death triggers happening because Toxrill is making things get smaller and smaller until they just die, you get to create 1/1 black creature tokens. And all those rats also have Death Touch, so that's even more death. Good inclusion there. Dreadhound, it's a 6/6 for 6. When he enters the battlefield, you mill 3 cards. Not always good, but not bad either, because whenever a creature dies or a creature card is put into a graveyard from a library, each opponent loses a life. So this is a different way of doing Aristocrats. You don't really get the life gain, so it's not really Aristocrats so much as it's Drain, but, you know, you get the point. Death triggers that you create yourself. Carrion Feeder, sacrifice a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on him. Sure, he can't block, but that's not always a bad thing. Banewhip Punisher, so when he enters the battlefield, put a -1/-1 counter on a creature, and with Proliferate, that can start to grow more and more, and then you can also pay black, sacrifice him, and destroy a creature with a -1/-1 counter on him. He does a couple things that you need there. Tooth Collector, I've been trying to find a way to use him. Toxrill was the answer. So what he does is, when he enters the battlefield, a creature an opponent controls gets -1/-1 until end of turn. Okay, blah, that's not really that great. However, if you have Delirium, and there's enough stuff in here that you should have 4 different things in the graveyard, at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, if you have 4 or more card types among cards in the graveyard, target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. So it keeps happening. Now, remember, at the beginning of each upkeep, you're putting slime counters on things. They're getting -1/-1 for that, and then this guy just adds more to it. Bushmeat Poacher, sacrifice a creature and gain life equal to its toughness and draw a card. Pretty simple there. Rot-Tide Gargantuan, so he has Exploit. I have him in here because I wanted to try something with him. So he exploits a creature, so you sacrifice a slug. And then each opponent has to sacrifice a creature. So death triggers are happening everywhere. On your side, on their side, there's some Aristocrats going on. There's, you know, all this other stuff. It's just, you know, I wanted to try something with him, so he's in here. Massacre Girl causes even more destruction and chaos, especially if you have a 1/1 slug out in play. That starts to make things get interesting, because if for some reason Toxrill's not out, this is your secondary commander, not really commander because you can't really cast it more than once because there's no graveyard recursion, but it fills the role that Toxrill would have if he's not on the board, okay? And Mage Hunter. This is another one of those ones that I'm looking at, trying to see if I can't make a 60-card deck out of. So whenever an opponent casts or copies an instant or sorcery spell, they lose a life, so it stops the crap of opponents doing storm stuff or anything that's like Spell Slinger. This hurts them a lot. So that's the creatures I've chosen for this $40 budget build. Next, we're going to go on to some card draw because we're in black and blue, and card draw should be pretty simple. You have slugs, you're going to sacrifice and draw 2 cards too. You're going to do it with Altar's Reap, you're going to do it with Village Rites. Blood Pact was in there just because I wanted to throw something in there that was definitively going to draw you cards. Perilous Research is something I just started pulling from my bulk that I had because I'm actually finding ways that I can use this. It's to the cast at instant speed. You draw 2 cards and sacrifice a permanent. In a lot of decks that have, I might actually add this to Talrand because of all the tokens, just good card draw. Shimmer Possibility, it's not really card draw so much as it is put card in your hand, but it works because, you know, you don't have to, it doesn't specify anything other than card. It doesn't have to be a specific kind of card. Same thing with Anticipate, only it does it for 3 instead of 4, and you're starting to see where we're going here. Contentious Plan, obviously draw a card for 2, and then Proliferate. Fits the theme of the deck. Dream Cache, draw 3 cards, and then take 2 cards from your hand. Doesn't have to be any of the ones that you just drew. So this is the more expensive Brainstorm. It literally is the same thing, only it costs 3 to do. Not at instant speed, unfortunately, but, you know, beggars can't be choosers. I don't have enough Brainstorms to go around, and they're not budget enough to add to every deck. Steady Progress, same thing as the other one. What was it? The Contention Plans. So it's just 1 more to cast, Proliferate, draw a card. At instant speed instead of sorcery speed. And then last but not least on the card draw, Tezzeret's Gambit. So it's a Phyrexian mana blue, which means you either pay a blue or 2 life and 3. And then you draw 2 cards, and then, of course, Proliferate. So you see the theme there. They all fit together. It all ties together well with all the slugs that you're probably going to create. And proliferating for infect counters, if you want to do it that way. It's all synergistic. Defensively, we're going to go into some more utility for defense. Eaten Alive, so sacrifice a creature or pay an enormous amount to exile target creature or planeswalker. Exile is actually key here. I added this instead of the other one. That's one to cast for the reason that it says exile, because graveyard recursion does happen. Grim Affliction, -1/-1 counters on things and proliferate. You see that is the theme of this deck. It fit perfectly. Necrotic Fumes, so as an additional cast to cost a spell, you exile a creature you control, slug counter, and then exile a creature or planeswalker. I specifically put in here some exile stuff on purpose because you never know what you're going to see or come up against, and I wanted to make sure that things that die stay dead. Instill Infection, same thing, put -1/-1 counter on things, and then this one lets you draw a card. No proliferate, unfortunately. Seal Sabotage, so it's really nice to be able to do something with this card. So I found that in Commander, that this card actually is better than I thought it would be. So you can counter an artifact spell. So if you do draw it in your opening hand, and somebody does get that first turn Soul Ring, it's really salty. They get really salty when you do that and Seal Sabotage it. It's funny, and I put that in there just for the memes. Same thing with a null, only this one at least goes after an enchantment. So, there are some shitty enchantments out there that you will want to annul, okay? What's that? Mystic Remora, 1 to cast, pain in the ass, annul it. Dissipate, another counterspell, and again, exile instead of letting it go to the graveyard. See, there's a common theme there. I hit a spot in my life where I think exiling is worth the extra mana in some cases because graveyard recursion, I've been seeing a lot of it lately. Fuel for the Cause, so another counterspell. It also lets you proliferate. You see where that's going. So it's control with a little bit of, oh, I might kill you with my proliferate. And last but not least, we're going to just go into general utility stuff. They do different things and have different effects, and I'll go over all that. So Warlock class. I don't like the second part of it. The first one's not bad, so each opponent gets to lose a life, blah, blah, blah. Skip the second one. It's going to happen. I don't really like doing that part, but it's the last part that I like. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses life equal to life that they've already lost this turn. So there are ways to take advantage of that. I wanted to see if it works in this deck, and I'm hoping that Nathaniel will tell me if it worked the way I wanted to or not. Phyresis, because if you want to give your commander some infect or something else that you have in play that might actually be hitting harder than your commander, infect only needs 10. Remember that, even in commander, it only needs 10. You might want to put it on something that's hitting pretty hard. Always works like a charm. Ghoulish Procession, death triggers. So whenever one or more non-token creatures dies, you create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed, and this ability can only trigger once a turn, and that can occur every turn, just like the other one. Remember, Toxrill continuously kills things. This can happen every turn. Contagion class, obviously. I mean, you're proliferating already anyway. Why not that? Mask of Avacyn to protect Toxrill. It gives him hexproof. It also gives him a nice little buff. Whisper Silk Cloak, again, gives it Shroud. You're not really going to be doing much with Toxrill other than using his own abilities, so Shroud doesn't really affect him that much. Also, he can't be blocked, so it's a 7/7. So if you give Toxrill Infect, 7/7 unblockable with Infect, kind of hurts. Trigon of Corruption. If you've watched my previous builds with Hapatra, I actually have 2 Trigons here. This is the black one and this is the blue one. The black one you've seen before. I kind of like this one because it puts -1/-1 counters on things, and especially in a deck where I use proliferate, these get pretty nasty pretty quickly. So you can just add counters, remove counters. The good thing about this is you can put a counter on itself. So if you do happen to run out of counters, you can still at least put one on it so it can proliferate again. So this one puts -1/-1 counters. This one draws a card. It's repeatable card draw. And it's actually not that expensive. Yes, it's 5 to cast initially. Once it's on the board, people don't really pay attention to it that much, and it's only 2 to use its ability. So it's 2 colorless. So it's pretty neat. So that's what I got for you this week. It was a fun little attempt to make a Toxrill deck. I know that most Toxrill decks are like in the hundreds and even thousands, but I wanted to try to do it on a budget. But I don't have the commander. I don't have the card. However, Nathaniel does. So, and he even has the special edition one. So it's even better for him. This is the $40 budget of everything minus the commander, obviously, because Toxrill is not, not cheap. So hopefully you learned something from it. If not, go ahead and contact me in a couple ways if you need some clarification on anything. That includes you, Nathaniel, clarification, or you want to know more about it, or if you just want to shoot the shit. You've got me on Facebook at bluebearsgames. You've got my email, bluebearsgames@gmail.com. And then, of course, if you want me to contact you specifically instead, just go ahead and leave a comment in the comment section below, and I will be more than happy to discuss anything with you. This is my favorite color combination in the game. I specifically like talking about decks that are blue and black, so I have no problem with that. Other than that, please do me the favor, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this out to somebody who's looking to build budget Toxrill. Most people are not. They're looking to build something pretty expensive, because Toxrill can get expensive. But, you never know. Somebody might want to watch it. Somebody might want to learn. Somebody might want to try to see what they can do on a budget. My ideas are usually a little bit different than everybody else's when it comes to how I build things, so this one's a little unique. Other than that, that's my time for the week. I want to thank you for watching. Join me again next week, where I'll be doing yet another build for somebody who has requested a deck. So, I don't know which one I'm going to do next, so I'll just leave that up to fate. See you next week.